Anytime. Call the meeting to order. Order in the court. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Charlie! Lay down, play dead. The name's Frank Eastman. People ask me if I've lived in town all my life. I tell them not yet. I'd like to start my talk with a story. It seems that Sunday afternoon the Baptist minister was walking up the river, enjoying a nice warm sunny afternoon hike, and he met a drunk coming down the river. So he said, I guess I'll talk with this guy. So he got chatting with him, and he says to the drunk, he said, how about it? He says, was you ever baptized? The drunk says, no, I don't think I was. So he said, would you like to be? Well, he said, don't do any harm if it don't do any good. He said, yeah, let's try it. So they wade out into the river to their waist, and the minister takes him, ducks his head underwater, pulls him up, and he says, did you see Jesus? No, he says, I don't think I did. Tucked him right in there again, held him a little longer. Pulled him up, and he says, did you see Jesus? No, he says, I don't think I did. That time he held him in until the guy thought he was going to drown. Pulled him up, and he says, did you see Jesus? And the drunk says, are you sure this is where he fell in? My great-grandfather came to Chatham back in the mid-1800s, as I recall. And my grandfather moved the house from where the state sand pile is now in on the Butter Hill Road to where it is, the house that my father was born in and that I was born in. My grandfather was a carpenter. He built buildings, barns, houses, finished work. Did some blacksmith work in his blacksmith shop. Back in those days, it was the horse and buggy days. And my grandfather was off building somewheres, and the guy he was working for had this old, well, she wasn't old, but she was a pretty scrawny driving horse. So Grandpa dickered with him, and he finally bought the horse and brought it home. And my father said she was just a rack of bones, skin and bones she was so poor. Well, Grandpa put her in the stable, and he started putting the hay and oats and sulfur and molasses to her, and she got to doing better, and he had the veterinary come and file the high spots off of on her teeth, and she got to eating, and finally she filled out, and she was a halfway decent looking animal. Well, he told my uncle Irvin to take the horse down to North Freiburg to the blacksmith shop to have her shod. Put shoes on her, because they was going to use her, because she was filled out and working, nice looking horse. On the way down, he stopped at the neighbors down here, and they were standing there visiting, and the neighbor kept looking at that horse, and finally he says, Irvin, he says, where did you ever get such a nice looking horse as that? Irvin says, Father bought the frame, built the rest. My grandfather, as I said, was a carpenter, and the town officials came to him and asked him if he could build a snow roll to roll the snow. He ended up, I think, building 3 of them, and they said there was a specification that he had to meet to make 6 spokes. They were 6 by 6 oak, and Grandpa did it. He made, I think, 3 rolls, and each roll had 6 spokes on a side. So one of them was stored up opposite of my house, and one of them was stored opposite of, just above the dairy farm up here, where Riley Pittman owns now. When I was in high school, February 1952, high school vacation, it started snowing. Father started as patrol foreman for the highway department for the state of New Hampshire in 1930. And somewheres in this collection of stuff, there's a picture of a writing on the wall in a garage in crayon that my Uncle Millard Chandler wrote, that the first snowplow ever driven across the town roads in the town of Chatham was driven by Everett Eastman, January 3rd, 1930. So up until then, they was rolling roads. As time went by, I ended up inheriting the job of helping to work on the roads, as it happens. And I worked as summer help and spare help while I was in high school. 1952, high school vacation. It started snowing. I don't remember the date, but it was in February. The rest of the crew was busy doing something else, so Father told me that I had to go with him to South Chatham to plow. He had the plow truck, chains on the truck, plowed South Chatham, snowing hard, got back to the state line, the other end of Robbins Hill, and one of the tire chains broke, the cross chain broke, and it broke the brake line on the truck. He didn't dare to drive the truck with no brakes, so we unhooked the plow at the foot of Robbins Hill with the state line and started home. We went over to the garage in North Freiburg and had the brake line fixed. And Father wanted to come home and get a new set of tire chains. On the way home, down by where George Charles used to live, between North Freiburg Firehouse and the potato shed, the lights on the truck would dim and then they'd get brighter. And as he drove along, of course it's snowing hard, and the light would dim and then it would get brighter. And I got to thinking about, the generator's getting wet. So I leaned over and looked out the window to see what was going on. And then I figured out the front fender on the truck was dragging in the snow so deep that the headlight in the truck snow was building up. And that would cast a shadow so the light would dim. When the snow got about so high, it would fall away and the light was bright. So Father says to me, he says, is those lights dimming? And I said, yeah. He said, what do you think the problem is? I said, this headlight's dragging in the snow. He says, the snow ain't that deep. I said, 'tis on my side. The slope of the bank, he was just off center just a little bit. Get over into the middle and we got along home. He got the crew together and went back. They had a bulldozer here in the area we had hired for the snow drifts in North Chatham. And my oldest brother drove the bulldozer and Father drove the truck with new chains. And 48 hours later, they got back. They went down and got the plow and plowed South Chatham and got back. A guy by the name of Henry Harvey owned the last house on Toad Hill Road at the time. And at times, certain winters he would spend in Freiburg. In certain winters he'd spend home up there. It had stopped snowing, the wind stopped blowing. We ended up with a recorded 33 inches of snow in the storm. And the town didn't have a piece of equipment big enough or rugged enough to plow the road. So Father says to me, take your snowshoes and go up and see if Henry is up there. He said, I don't know whether you went to Freiburg or not. I came from Butter Hill Road, put my snowshoes on out here by the church, snowshoed all the way up to the house. And when I got to where I could see the house, all I could see was snow and the chimney. There was a straight line and the chimney sticking up in the middle. No smoke. I'm probably as far as from here to church from the home. And I watched to see if I could see any smoke, and I said to myself, he ain't here. And I looked at it again, and I said, I'm going to go check and find out. So I snowshoed up to the house. When I got into the dooryard, there was a big mound of snow, and in it was a two-door 1946 Chevrolet car, and no tracks around it. I snowshoed around the end of the house, and the back porch had been shoveled off, and there was no footprints. That told me right off quick somebody was in that house. So I snowshoed down off of the snow onto the back porch, and when my snowshoes went on the porch floor, it made a noise, and I was bent over to take my snowshoes off, and the door opened, and it was Henry. So he invited me in, and he and his woman was there, and they couldn't see out the windows. They was warm, they had plenty of wood and one thing and another. I told Henry, I said, we don't know when we're going to get you out of here, but you give me a list, I'll stop into the store and get you some groceries, and I'll get them back to you. So he wrote out a list. School opened after the vacation. I got on the school bus up here at the other end of the cemetery, rode down to Stowe Store. The store was then operated by a fellow by the name of Armand Pepin. You know everybody in town, of course, just like I do now. So I went in with a list, and I said, this is for Henry Harvey. Fill the list. I'll pick it up tonight when I come home from the bus, on the bus. The bus driver stopped at the store. I picked up Henry's groceries. He stopped at the church. I put on my snowshoes, and I took the groceries up to Henry. That went on for pretty near 3 weeks. Those people were definitely snowbound. I went in about the second or third time, and Henry had gone out and he'd shoveled the width of the window from the eaves down to the bottom of the windowsill so that light would shine into the house. He didn't shovel out the front door because there was no need of it. He could get out the back door. But he could sit in the chair and look down the road. And I think it may be the third time that I went in. He says to me, you see those snowshoe tracks down there? And I said, yeah, I see them. I almost said I'd made them, but I said, yeah, I see them. He says, that's the only damn thing on the face of this earth that lets Ida and I know that anybody is alive besides us. So it went on about, I don't know, I think it was somewhere near 3 weeks. They sent a big grader down, and the operator on the grader was working for the highway department. And my father told him, he says, you take that grader. It had a V-plow on the front of it. I was as tall then as I am now. I could stand on the nose iron of the V-plow and just reach the low end of the plow. So it was a good-sized plow. Father told him, he says, you take the plow and you go plow Henry out. And the operator said, no, he says, that's town road. Father says, don't give a damn, you go plow him out. Well, the guy was angry about it, so he just made the path. He didn't widen it any. Henry shoveled out his car, got in the car and drove down, and part way down he got stuck because the road was so narrow, the hind wheels spun. I brought Father's tractor out, backed all the way up to where the car was, dragged him out, dug a hole in the snowbank up here by the church, big enough so Henry could park his car and it wouldn't be in anybody's way. And then he could carry his groceries from the church home until they finally got him out. So I've seen some snowstorms. Worked for the highway department, started in 1957. And after a while, they wanted me to become a first aid instructor for the highway department, so I went to class. And my instructor told me, in your first aid classes, there's no such thing as a stupid question. So I believed it. for a while. In the process of working, we ended up mowing bushes, and we went over the roadside with a mower, and then anything that they couldn't get, we finished off with a hand scythe. We're mowing on the backside of Hurricane Mountain. There's a wide place in the road up the hill just this side of where the reservoir used to be. So I left the pickup there, over on the right-hand side, mowed down to where we were supposed to stop, sat over and mowed back up to the pickup. Just as I got to the pickup, I put the scythe in the body to move ahead, and this car from Ohio stopped, driving up the hill. 4 ladies in it, all 4 windows down. The woman driving the car looks at me and she says, "Where are we going?" No such thing as a stupid question. I told her I didn't know. After I'd signed on with the Highway Department in '57, I don't remember what year it was, a woman by the name of Hilda Luschke was working out to the healthcare center in Freiburg. And she got done late at night. And we found out that during snowstorms, that after 11:30, between then and 5:30 in the morning, there wouldn't be a tire track anywhere in North Chatham if it was snowing. If it snowed all night, there wouldn't be a tire track after Hilda got home at 11:30. We was coming up from South Chatham one night, and down here by where the guy has got the nice garden and the chickens and the eggs for sale, 3 houses this side of Stowe Store on the right coming up. There was tracks, there was probably 3.5, 4 inches of snow in the road and snowing hard. There was tracks where a house cat came out of his driveway over the little snowbank that the plows had made and started this way. We expected we'd see that cat at any minute, but all we saw was tracks. Every time that cat was on the side of he'd go over and start up the snowbank a little bit, and then he'd come back into the road because it wasn't uphill. But every time he was opposite a driveway, or near a driveway, he was on the wrong side of the road. We never lost sight of those cat tracks all the way from what used to be Spide Watson's house to where Lauren Andrews used to live, just this side of the Stonehouse Road. I measured it, and it's just a tad over 7 miles. Those cat tracks never went out of sight, and we never saw the cat. So he made it. There was a time when there was a Boy Scout troop from Massachusetts, and I don't know what town they were from, but they were a fairly decent-sized group, apparently. And they had permission to use what's known as the Bricket Place. The Highway Department was authorized to plow to the last house, which at that time was Harold Andrews' place, where Jim and Becky lived. So we was turning around there, but then we got authorized to plow to the Bricket Place, and not being a well-traveled road or a necessary road, we left it until the storm was over. Once we got everything taken care of, salt and sand and road was ready, then we'd put the plow on and go up and plow out the Bricket Place. We were going in to plow the Bricket Place with this one particular day, and my brother was driving the truck. I'm looking out in the woods to see how high the snow is, where it hasn't been plowed, and natural lay of the land and one thing and another. And in a certain spot there's a partridge's head sticking out of the snow, just his head. So I told Herb, I said, "There's a partridge buried in the snow there." "Yeah, he'll fly." Well, we went on down. Of course, we had to make 2 passes, had to make the road wide enough so we could plow another storm, had to have a place to put it. So we went back up and turned around, and on the way back down, I told him, I said, "You slow down here and let's watch." Well, when we got down, the partridge was still there, just his head sticking out of the snow. So we stopped the truck, because it sat there running, and we had the lights on, and that made the bird nervous, and his head started to twitch. And pretty soon he stepped right up on top of that snow. And that bird wasn't much bigger than the egg. He was awful small. But we sat and watched him. You never saw a motion. You never saw anything move. But the bird kept getting bigger. They can hold their feathers down tight to their body or fluff them up. And he was fluffing his feathers up, but it was so slow you couldn't see it. Finally, he started to take 2 or 3 steps, and then he couldn't stand it any longer. He took off, flew. As time went by, the highway department decided that one truck wasn't enough to plow both ends. We were plowing North Chatham and South Chatham. So they hired a truck. And Jim Lane had a dump truck up here, so he put a plow front on it, and my brother Nelson drove the truck, Jim's brother-in-law. So he was driving the truck. Well, same thing, we were still plowing the Rickett place after a storm. It was storming pretty hard, and we turned around Harold's driveway. In the next pass, there was tracks where a bull had come out of the barn, out into the road, and turned and walked up towards the basin. And in those bull tracks, there was man tracks, boot tracks. Still snowing hard. We turned around, came back down. The next pass, there was tracks where a man had walked back from out of sight and into the house. There were tracks where a tricycle type tractor had come out of the dooryard and gone up the road. Same direction the bull went. The next pass, there was drag marks in the road, this wide, and tractor tracks outside of it. So my brother says to me, "What do you think took place there?" And I said, "It looks to me like Harold was going to butcher his bull, or his bull got out and he couldn't catch him. So he went and got his rifle, shot him, went and got the tractor and dragged him home." Nah, that didn't happen. Okay, we'll find out sometime. Well, it went along sometime in the summer. I happened to be talking to Harold, and I said, "I saw some tracks in the snow there where you looked like you'd gone up with your tractor and dragged something." "Yeah," he said, "I thought that was a good day to butcher the bull." He said, "I shot at him with a .38 pistol, but apparently the gunpowder wasn't strong enough." He said the bull shook his head and walked away. He said, "I went in the house and got the .30. Then he said, I come back and got the tractor." So that's exactly what happened. Nelson's youngest daughter, Nelson had married Steve Lane's daughter, and Nelson and Arlene's youngest daughter used to go up to the house, up to their grandfather's, and play cards. Played cards with you a lot, probably. And it was raining this particular night. It had snowed, and the driveways was plowed, and we'd plowed the road, and we'd salted it. And when you put salt on the road in a rainstorm, the salt will melt down through, and then the brine that it creates will flow underneath the ice, and that separates the ice from the paving, and a lot of times you can plow it off enough so traffic can go. So that's what we was doing. Well, Roberta wanted to go up and play cards. We didn't have any idea how long we'd be plowing. It was going to last as long as the storm does. So she went in, and Nelson told her, he said, "When we make the last pass," he said, "I'll blow the horn before we get to the farm and wait for you." So we waited out in the road, and the driveway is fairly long, and there was quite a lot of ice, and there were some ridges where they'd left when they plowed. So we stopped to pick her up. She came out on the porch, and she started running towards the truck. pouring rain, freezing. And she got almost to the truck, and her feet went out from under her, and down she went. And she slid along a ways, got up onto her feet, and jumped into the truck. She said, I was stepping on crunchies. I ran out of crunchies. Some friends of mine from Massachusetts come up with bird dogs. And I had done some hunting, but I'd never hunted in front of behind a dog, you know, a bird dog. So I said, how about going with, letting me go with you? Well, where my cousin Richard Charles lives, he lives in a brick house, and there's 2 wooden houses beyond that. The third one up is the Royce house. And this guy says, I want to know if I can get permission to hunt that area across the road from those 3 houses. And I said, well, you'll have to ask a guy in the Royce house for permission to hunt on his, and that's Uncle Millard Chandler. And I said, you would have to ask a guy that lives in the brick house to get permission because he owns the land next to it. And the guy says, okay, which one's the brick house? As years went by, the things changed and so forth, and if it wasn't a bad storm, we didn't put on the extra truck, but we'd plow it with 1 truck. Plowing down through South Chatham, before you get to the sharp turn where Hardwood Hill Road branches off, and then you go down by the Chatham Motors and one thing and another. At the foot of that hill there's a kind of a, well, it ain't really flat, but it's nearer level than others. My brother Dick was driving the plow. It was after it stopped storming. Of course, I'm curious, I'm looking out in the woods. There's a steep bank outside the road with a big hemlock tree growing on it. And then there's a flat coming back towards North Freiburg. Well, when we went by that, I could see some strange tracks near that big hemlock. And apparently Dick saw them too. He said, did you see them tracks? And I said, yeah. He said, what do you think they are? I said, I don't know, but I think it'd be a good idea to find out when we go back. So when we come back coming back the other way, we stopped. There was tracks where a weasel had come along on top of the bank, and like I had said before, partridges will bury themselves in the snow to keep warm. It's warmer under the snow than it is 20 below in the air. I don't know how cold it was, but this partridge had buried himself in the snow near the base of this hemlock tree. The weasel came around the tree and attacked the partridge. He was on a bank. The partridge took off, the weasel hung on. The weasel's feet dragged, and the partridge's wings whipped in the snow, and the slope was enough so that the partridge didn't gain any elevation, but the ground dropped away so the weasel didn't drag anymore. There was a little knoll of snow snow-covered rock or whatever. And when they went across that, the weasel dragged, and then he didn't. So we followed the tracks along to see what they all looked like, one thing and another, and at the end of the trail, there was a big yellow birch, and there at the foot of the yellow birch laid the partridge. No tracks, no weasel tracks, nothing. So I looked at Dick, and he looked at me, and I said, well, let's find out what's going on. So I reached down and picked up the partridge, and in the snow, there was a hole just the size of a weasel. And most of the partridge had been eaten away from underneath. So we figured out that the weasel caught the partridge, and the partridge didn't make it. That's about it. No, wait a minute. I got another one here somewhere. Okay, here it is. Here it is. I knew I had another note. My first day of school was in this room. I went here the first grade. At the end of the first grade, they moved us up to the school in North Chatham, where Hobbs Log Cabin sits now. It used to be called Eastman School. In this room, the teacher's desk sat right where it is now, and the teacher sat here and headed this way. In North Chatham, it was just reversed. The teacher sat up there. I was, I think, maybe in the 7th or 8th grade, and I sat at a desk near the window located where that one is. Kids wanted to see animals and wildlife and one thing and another, so somebody got the bright idea to open the window, jam a sandwich on the windowsill, so part of it was outside so the birds would come. So we was watching chickadees and blue jays and one thing and another, and pretty soon a red squirrel hopped up on the windowsill. Well, my cousin was the same age I am, and I'm sitting near the window, and he said, "Suppose you can catch him?" Probably. So I put my glove on, opened the window, put my hand out, sat perfectly still. Sat there for quite a while. The red squirrel showed up. When he got where I was close enough, I grabbed him. When I grabbed him, he grabbed me. When he grabbed me, I pulled my hand in. He hung on. We had a red squirrel in school. We ended up giving him quite an education. We taught him how to run. Teacher didn't care much for that. So I guess that's about it, folks. I can't hear anything. It takes longer to set that up and just bale hay.